A waitress sets a plate of toast under a ladle of white sauce. The year is 1954, and the plate costs about 35 cents. Nobody orders it now. 15 dishes carried the American lunch counter through its best years, and every one of them has left the menu. We are counting down from 15 to 1. Number 7 is the dish nearly everyone alive today has misnamed. Number 2, I am keeping covered until we reach it. Number 1 is the plate that made sandwich and dinner the same word. One thing before we go on, and I will not mention it again. Everything I have gathered about keeping a house the old way is written down plain in my little books. It is written out step by step with pictures. It is at clarasamericanattic.com. If you would like it, it is there. A lunch counter was a long laminate ledge inside a 5 and dime store or a drugstore. Woolworths, Kresge's, Newberry's, the Rexall counter. Office clerks, shop girls, travelers, and families ate there at midday because it was fast and it cost little. From the 1920s into the 1960s, it was the everyday spine of American midday eating, and the food on it followed one hard rule. The rule was stretch. Cheap protein, day-old bread, a flour and milk sauce, a pickle spear, and bottomless coffee. Yesterday's roast became today's special. A jar of dried beef became a hot plate. The counter cook and the woman at home ran the same arithmetic out of the same tins. That shared arithmetic explains 14 of the 15 dishes ahead, and it explains why they left too. Most people assume these dishes died of taste. The record points somewhere else. Ladling gravy takes a cook. Croquettes take a fryer and a timer. Cheese sauce breaks on a steam table. Patty shells stopped arriving on the supplier's truck. Fast food scaled from 1955 onward, shopping moved to the malls, and the 5 and dime counters closed under it all. Start at 15, with the coldest plate on the counter. Number 15 is Ambrosia. Oranges, canned pineapple, shredded coconut, and in most versions marshmallows and a maraschino cherry. It came out of a chilled well in a shallow dish beside the sandwiches. The menu filed it under salads, in the same column as the tomato slice and the scoop of cottage cheese. What a countercook meant by the word salad is the first thing to fix. A modern menu writer would call that a dessert filed in the wrong place, and would say Ambrosia died because sugar in a salad is a mistake. The counters that sold it were working from a different definition. Salad on a 1940s menu meant cold, composed and made ahead. Sweetness had nothing to do with the category. The reason it earned its place has nothing to do with flavor at all. Ambrosia solved 3 problems at once. It needed no cooking, no oven, and no cook standing over it during a rush. It held for hours in a cold well without wilting the way a plate of leaves did. In winter, citrus and coconut read as festive when almost nothing else on the counter did. That last quality is the one that kept it printed on menus for 40 years. It survives now as a potluck joke, mostly because marshmallows moved to the dessert side of the language. The impulse behind it did not go anywhere. A cold bowl of cut fruit, made ahead and sold as the light and virtuous choice, is on every counter in America this morning. The coconut left and the price went up, and that same swap happens again at number 11 for the same reason. So Ambrosia was a make-ahead cold plate that a busy counter could sell all day without a cook. It left when the categories on the menu split in two and sweet things were sent to the back page. Number 14 is the sandwich that was ordinary in 1950 and is now almost impossible to buy. Number 14 is the olive nut sandwich. Cream cheese beaten soft, chopped green olives, with the brine worked in, pecans or walnuts, spread on white or wheat and cut into triangles. Tea rooms sold it, and so did lunch counters across the South and the Midwest. On those menus, it sat in the ordinary middle of the sandwich list, and its disappearance since is the sharpest on this list. Ask a sandwich cook today, and you will hear that olives and cream cheese fight, that green olive is too sharp for a soft cheese, and that modern eaters were right to drop it. Recipe columns from the 1930s and 40s treat the pairing as settled and unremarkable. The brine was the point, and that salt was doing a job the counter needed done every single day. A counter had a hard rush and then a long, flat afternoon. A spread sandwich could be made in the morning, wrapped in wax paper and stacked cold, and it would still be good at 2 o'clock. No griddle, no gravy, no plate to wash. The perceived elegance was free. Elegance without cost is the whole engine of this list, and it is about to appear again. It went when the delicatessen case took over. Supermarket sliced meat and pre-packaged salads killed the morning spread ritual, and burger-forward menus had no room for a sandwich that read as a ladies' tea room. Church and community cookbooks kept the recipe in print long after the counters stopped making it, and the same rescue happens to number 13 in the same books for the same reason. So the olive nut sandwich was a no-cook, make-ahead spread that bought a counter elegance it could not otherwise afford. It left when the deli case made spreads look like work. Number 13 is the sandwich most Americans have now only ever eaten at a funeral. Number 13 is the ham salad sandwich. Baked ham ends put through a hand crank grinder, pickle relish, chopped celery, mayonnaise or salad dressing to bind, on soft white bread pressed flat under wax paper. Its canned cousin, deviled ham, came in a small tin wrapped in white paper. Both were counter staples, and both started as a problem that had to be solved. The modern reading is that ground meat salads are a low-quality product, the thing a kitchen makes when it has nothing better. A counter cook would have found that backwards. Ham salad began with a whole baked ham, which is the most expensive item in the room. Grinding the ends down was how a good ham paid for its last 4 sandwiches, and that order of operations changes what the sandwich meant. Before a slicing machine and a plastic sleeve, a counter bought its meat in one piece and carved it down through the week. Roast on Monday, sliced sandwiches Tuesday and Wednesday, salad from the ends on Thursday. Nothing was thrown out, because throwing food away was the visible failure. Take that chain away, and the sandwich has no reason to exist. The chain went away in the 1960s and 70s. Meat arrived pre-sliced and pre-packaged, portioned by a machine in another state, with no ends left in the kitchen to grind at all. Ham salad survived in delicatessens across the South and at church suppers and funerals, and that narrow survival tells you exactly what kind of dish it had become. So ham salad was the final act of a whole baked ham, ground down so that nothing was lost. It left when meat stopped arriving in one piece. Number 12 is the dish that once marked a careful hostess and is now the internet's favorite thing to laugh at. Number 12 is tomato aspic. Tomato juice, plain gelatin, celery, sometimes chopped green olive, set firm in a mold and turned out onto a lettuce leaf with a spoon of mayonnaise beside it. Savory gelatin. It sat on lunch counters and tea room menus through the 1930s, 40s, and 50s as an ordinary summer plate. Ordinary is the word that has been lost, and it is the important one. Every retro food video reaches for aspic as proof that the past had no taste. Period menus say something else. Congealed salad was company food. It signaled a cook who had planned ahead, owned a mold, and could turn a set gelatin out clean without breaking it. The skill was visible on the plate, and what that skill was buying is the part nobody explains. Before air conditioning was everywhere, a cold, savory plate in July was worth real money to a counter. Aspic was made the night before, sliced clean, held for hours in a cold well, and never wilted. It used tomato juice from a can or a glut of garden tomatoes. Every quality it had was a quality the counter needed, which is why the home cook copied it rather than the other way round. Sweet gelatin stayed in the language, and savory gelatin did not. Once the word gelatin meant dessert, a tomato-flavored version read as a mistake rather than a category. Refrigeration and year-round air conditioning removed the problem it had been solving. This is the history of presentation and thrift, and nothing here is a recommendation to go and make one. So aspic was a cold, sliceable, make-ahead summer plate that proved a cook had planned. It left when gelatin became a dessert word and a machine solved the summer problem instead. Number 11 is the plate that a national restaurant chain printed under its own heading for years. Number 11 is the cottage cheese plate. A scoop or two of cottage cheese in a lettuce cup, canned peach halves, or a pear half, sometimes a tomato slice, sometimes a cold beef patty set beside it. Counters sold it as the light choice, and the chains kept selling it long after the lunch counter era was over. There is a printed menu that shows exactly how long. A menu from 1975 carried a whole section headed lean and low. Beef patty with cottage cheese, steak with cottage cheese, cold roast beef with cottage cheese, peach halves with cottage cheese. A San Francisco diner in the 1980s ran a skinny lunch pairing a hamburger or a fish fillet with fruit and cottage cheese. A printed heading on a national chain menu is a very different thing from a passing fad. The easy story is that this was one sad joke of a plate. It was a printed category on national menus for decades, which means people were ordering it. It needed no cook, no grill, and no timing at all. It was assembled cold from 2 tins and a head of lettuce, and it carried the best margin on the page while being sold as restraint. The plate reads as bleak now to anyone who did not grow up with it as normal. The architecture never went anywhere. A tub of cultured dairy with fruit on top, sold as the disciplined lunch, sits in every cooler in the country this morning at 4 or 5 times the price. The next number is where the counter stops assembling and starts cooking again. So the cottage cheese plate was a cold, assembled, high-margin lunch that mid-century diet culture put a printed heading over. It left when diet fashion moved on and canned peaches stopped reading as modern. Number 10 is where the flour and the milk come out, and where half of this list really lives. Number 10 is creamed tuna on toast, called Tuna Wiggle in a good many kitchens. Canned tuna warmed through a white sauce of butter, flour, and milk, usually with canned peas, poured over a slice of toast and eaten with a knife and fork. It was on counter menus, in school kitchens, and in church halls, and the toast underneath it is doing something very specific. Toast is the cheapest plate a kitchen owns. It holds a ladle of sauce, it absorbs it instead of letting it run, and it turns half a cup of filling into a full meal that looks like one. 6 of the 15 dishes on this list arrive on a slice of it. The Toast Raft is the single most important object in this video, and almost nobody notices it. The objection you will hear is that canned fish in a milk sauce sounds unpleasant, and that it faded because tastes improved. Tuna itself never left. Americans still eat an enormous quantity of it every year. What left was the white sauce, and the white sauce left for reasons that have nothing to do with the fish. A white sauce needs a cook who stirs. It thickens, then it thins, then it skins over on a steam table and has to be worked again. It cannot sit in a warming pan for 3 hours without turning to paste. Every dish on this list that died young died with a cream sauce attached to it, and that mechanism explains the next 5 numbers before we even get to them. So creamed tuna stretched 1 small tin across a full plate using flour, milk, and a slice of bread. It left with the sauce rather than with the fish. Number 9 is the dish where a counter cook was doing genuine kitchen work, at speed, for pennies a plate. Number 9 is the chicken croquette. Cooked chicken minced fine, bound with a very thick white sauce, chilled until it holds, shaped by hand into a cone or a cylinder, rolled in crumbs and fried. Served 2 to a plate with cream sauce or gravy poured beside them and a sprig of parsley if the counter was feeling formal. Read that list of steps again, because the labor inside it is the whole story. The modern assumption is that a croquette is a way to hide cheap filler. A croquette is more work than a plain chicken breast, not less. Someone poached the bird, pulled the meat, made the sauce, chilled the mixture overnight, shaped every single piece by hand, and fried them to order. Cheap ingredients and expensive labor. That trade was normal in 1940, and it is close to impossible now. Labor was the cheap part of a mid-century kitchen, and food was the expensive part. Today, those two have swapped places, and the croquette sits on the wrong side of the swap. Was there a dish in your family that took 2 whole days and cost almost nothing to buy? I would like to hear about it in the comments. The counter version carried one more problem on top of all that labor. A fried croquette has a very short life. It is crisp for a few minutes and soft forever after, so it cannot be held in a pan through a lunch rush the way a slice of meatloaf can. Once kitchens moved to holding and serving, the croquette had no future in them. It is still sold by the million in Spain, in Japan and in the Netherlands, and almost nowhere in America. So the croquette turned leftover chicken into something that read as fine dining, at the cost of 2 days of a cook's attention. It left when attention became the expensive ingredient. Number 8 is that very same mixture, loosened into a sauce, poured over toast, and given a name with a king in it. Number 8 is chicken a la king. Diced cooked chicken in a cream sauce with mushrooms, green pepper and strips of pimiento, served over toast, over rice, or spooned into a pastry shell. The pimiento is not decoration. Those red strips are what made a pale plate look like a dish somebody chose, and that distinction was worth real money on a counter. It gets dismissed now as banquet food, the sort of thing served at a wedding in 1962 because it could be made for 200 people at once. That is entirely true, and it is also the complement. A dish that holds for 200 people is a dish that solved a problem no modern menu has to solve. The problem was that a counter never knew how many people were coming. Every item so far has one thing in common. It could be built ahead in a single pot and portioned out the moment the door opened. Chicken a la king was the purest version of that. Pantry chicken, a tin of mushrooms, a jar of pimiento, and a sauce that let a small amount of meat cover a large amount of plate. The pastry shell itself is the reason the dish died, and that is a stranger story than it sounds. A vol au vent, the patty shell, arrived frozen on the supplier's truck for decades. When distributors dropped it from their standard lines, kitchens that had never made pastry had no way to serve the dish in its familiar shape. And the plate I have kept covered is getting close now, so stay with me. A dish loses its reason to exist when the thing that made it special stops arriving on the truck. So chicken a la king stretched a little chicken across a lot of plate and dressed it in red pepper so it read as a choice. It left when cream sauce lost its status and the shell left the catalog. Number 7 is the one almost everybody gets wrong, including the people who are sure they have eaten it. Number 7 is Welsh Rarebit, and it is printed on a great many old menus as Welsh Rabbit. There is no rabbit in it, and there never was. It is a hot cheese sauce, cooked in a pan, poured over toast, and eaten with a knife and fork, and it is almost certainly not the thing you are picturing right now. Nearly everyone who has heard the name pictures a grilled cheese sandwich, or cheese melted under a grill. That is a different thing entirely. Rarebit is a sauce that is cooked. Grated hard cheese is melted into ale or milk with mustard, a little Worcestershire, and often cayenne, stirred until it is smooth and glossy, and it stays pourable. The difference between melting cheese and cooking it is the reason this dish disappeared. Melted cheese breaks. Heat it and the fat separates out and it turns to rubber and grease. Rarebit is built to stop exactly that happening. The starch in the flour and the mustard and the acid in the ale hold the emulsion together so the sauce stays smooth. It is a real piece of technique wearing a very silly name, and that technique is exactly what a steam table destroys. The straw man here is the chef who calls it peasant food dressed up with a fancy word. Rarebit was the meatless Friday plate, the cheap protein, the thing a working man ordered when he wanted something hot and could not pay for meat. It was also the most technically demanding sauce on the whole counter. Both of those were true at the same moment, and it is the second one that killed it. A sauce that has to be watched cannot sit in a warming pan. Cheese sauce on a steam table separates within the hour, and the kitchens of the 1960s were moving toward holding absolutely everything. The word itself left the language at the same time. What replaced it needed no skill at all, and the whole counter went that way. So Welsh Rarebit was a cooked cheese sauce over toast, a genuine piece of technique sold for pennies, and it is not a grilled cheese sandwich. It left because the emulsion will not hold in a warming pan. Number 6 is the plate that a whole generation of American children still describes as a punishment. Number 6 is liver and onions. Sliced beef liver dusted in seasoned flour, laid on a hot griddle for a couple of minutes aside, and smothered in onions cooked slowly until they were soft and brown. Diner versions often laid a strip of bacon over the top. It was on counter menus every single week, and how it became a threat is worth understanding. Organ meat was thrifty protein, and it cooked in about 4 minutes, which made it close to perfect for a counter. It cost a fraction of what a steak cost. It came off the griddle fast in the middle of a rush. Counter cooks and home cooks handled it as ordinary skill rather than as an ordeal, and the recipe columns of the period treat it exactly that way. The ordeal was manufactured somewhere else. Liver is unforgiving. 30 seconds too long on the griddle, and it goes from tender to gray and grainy, and there is no recovering it from there. A rushed counter overcooked it constantly. A whole generation of American children met beef liver in exactly that condition, at school and at home, and formed a permanent opinion of it. That reputation outlived every counter that ever served it. The American palate turned hard against organ meat in the second half of the century, and once a food becomes a childhood threat, it does not come back. Liver survives on a handful of old diner menus in the Midwest and the Northeast, usually on one weekday, usually ordered by people over 70. The next number went the other way entirely. It was killed by a frozen tray. So liver and onions was fast, cheap griddle protein that a good cook handled in 4 minutes and a rushed cook ruined. It left on its reputation rather than on its merits. Number 5 is a dish whose name promised a steak, and which delivered on that promise for about 50 years. Number 5 is Salisbury steak. Ground beef seasoned and bound, shaped into an oval, browned on the griddle, and served under a brown onion or mushroom gravy, usually with mashed potatoes. The name comes from a 19th century American doctor called James Salisbury, who promoted minced beef in his writing. That name is a piece of history and not a health claim, and what it was doing on a menu is the interesting part. A counter could not sell a steak to a clerk on a shop girl's wages. It could sell the word. Salisbury steak gave the customer the shape of a steak, the gravy of a steak, and the dinner plate of a steak, at the price of ground beef. It was one of the most honest pieces of menu writing in America, because the plate delivered exactly what the arrangement promised. Then something happened to the name that no counter could survive. In the 1950s and 60s, Salisbury steak became the standard main course of the frozen tray dinner. It sat in the compartment beside the peas and the apple cobbler in millions of American freezers, reheated in an oven for 30 minutes. The name stopped meaning a griddled plate and started meaning a frozen one. A counter cannot charge a sit-down price for a word that the freezer aisle already owns. That is the whole mechanism. The dish itself never changed. Its association did, and no diner wanted to be the place that served television dinner food. The same patty, ground beef under a brown gravy, is on gastropub menus right now under other names and at 4 or 5 times the price. So Salisbury steak sold the experience of a steak at the price of mince, and it did that honestly for 50 years. It left when the freezer aisle took the name away from it. Number 4 is the plate that regional diners in the Midwest still quietly serve and that no national chain will touch. Number 4 is the hot roast beef sandwich, called a beef Manhattan across much of the Midwest. A slice of white bread laid on the plate, sliced roast beef over it, a scoop of mashed potato beside it or on top, then brown gravy ladled over the whole plate until the bread underneath has given up being bread. That last part is deliberate, and it is the oldest trick in this video. Bread under gravy stops being a sandwich and becomes the base of a full dinner. A counter could take yesterday's roast, slice it thin, hide any dryness under gravy, and serve a plate that looked like a sundae for about 60 cents. The customer got abundance. The kitchen got its roast paid for twice. All of that depends on one thing the modern kitchen no longer does. The objection is that this is a soggy sandwich, and nobody really wants one. Order it in Indiana or Ohio or upstate New York, and you will find people who want it very much. The reason it never went national is the roast itself. A chain built on frozen patties and a timed grill has no roasting cycle, no drippings, and therefore no gravy of its own. No drippings, no dish. Fast food scaled from 1955 onward on a system that took the roasting oven out of the kitchen entirely. Gravy became a powder mixed with water. Once that happened, the beef Manhattan could be imitated and never really made again. It survives exactly where independent diners survive, and it vanishes everywhere else. The next number had the very same problem and lost the argument even harder. So the hot roast beef plate turned a leftover roast and a slice of bread into a full dinner, and it lives or dies on real drippings. It left the national menu at the moment the roasting oven did. Number 3 is the one that proves these dishes never lost their audience at all. Number 3 is the meatloaf platter, not a sandwich. A thick slice cut from a loaf, brown gravy over it, mashed potatoes, a vegetable, and a roll on the side. It was one of the anchor plates of the American lunch counter for 40 years, and it is now genuinely difficult to find in a restaurant. The reason that is strange takes a moment to set up. Meatloaf never fell out of favor with the public. It is one of the most searched comfort recipes online. People cook it at home constantly, teach it to their children, and argue about the topping. The home dish is in excellent health, and the restaurant version is close to extinct. 2 versions of one dish went in opposite directions, and that split has a cause. The straw man is the restaurant consultant who says meatloaf is dated and does not sell. The search numbers say the appetite for it is enormous. What changed was the economics of the plate, and specifically what a modern kitchen needs a menu item to do. A modern menu item has 3 separate jobs, and meatloaf fails 2 of them. It has to photograph well, and a gray-brown slice under gravy does not. It has to travel in a takeout container, and mashed potato under gravy arrives as a single gray mass 40 minutes later. It has to hold in a warming pan without drying, and a sliced loaf under a heat lamp dries at the cut face within the hour. None of that is about flavor, and all of it is about the last 20 years. So a dish with genuine mass appeal was engineered off the menu by delivery apps, photography, and holding equipment. The counter version needed a cook to make a loaf every morning and slice it to order. That is a person and an oven, and those 2 things are exactly what a modern kitchen is built to avoid. Which brings us to the plate I have kept covered. So the meatloaf platter left the menu while the meatloaf itself stayed in millions of kitchens. It was pushed out by cameras and by containers. Number 2 is the dish that soldiers named, that homemakers made out of a jar, and that a great many people are still hunting for today. Number 2 is creamed chipped beef on toast, and that is the plate I have kept covered. Paper-thin dried beef, rinsed of some of its salt, warmed through a white sauce of butter, flour, milk, and black pepper, poured over a slice of toast. Soldiers called it SOS. The polite reading of that is stuff on a shingle, and the nickname did more damage to this dish than the taste ever did. Dried chipped beef came in a small glass jar with a metal lid, and it kept on a shelf for months without refrigeration. That is the entire reason for the dish. A jar of shelf-stable protein, a spoon of flour, a cup of milk, and a slice of bread makes a hot meal for pennies with nothing fresh in the house at all. A dish built for an empty pantry does not survive a full one. The straw man is easy to find here. Almost anyone under 50 who has heard of this has heard of it as an army joke, salty gray stuff poured over bread. Diners served it regularly and people ordered it on purpose. It stayed on breakfast and lunch menus into the 1970s, and its decline tracks the exact moment menus started chasing color. White sauce on white bread photographs as very nearly nothing. When menus moved from typed cards to photographs, and later on to screens, every beige dish on the counter lost. Chipped beef was the most beige of all of them. Add the salt, add the military joke, add a sauce that needs stirring, and the dish had nothing left to defend it. And yet the jar is still on the shelf. Dried beef in glass jars is still sold in American supermarkets, and people still buy it. Home cooks hunt for it and make this dish for their families most weeks of the year. Almost no restaurant in the country will put it on a plate. The gap between what people cook and what they are able to order is the whole shape of this list. So creamed chipped beef was shelf-stable protein turned into a hot meal for pennies, and it was buried by a nickname and by a photograph. It left the menu and it stayed in the pantry. Number 1 is the plate that made sandwich and dinner the same word, and it is the one people miss the most. Number 1 is the open-faced hot turkey sandwich. White bread laid on the plate, sliced roast turkey over it, a scoop of mashed potato beside it, then gravy ladled over the bread, the turkey, and the potato all together, until there is nothing on that plate that is not under gravy. It is called a sandwich, and it is eaten with a knife and fork, and that contradiction is the point of it. A counter roasted a turkey because turkey was cheap per pound and it fed a great many people. The breast went out as sliced sandwiches. The ends and the dry pieces went under gravy, where dryness stops being a problem at all. The bird paid for itself twice, and the customer got the most generous-looking plate on the counter for well under $1. Generosity was the product, and gravy was how a poor kitchen managed to buy it. The sound of it is what people describe when they remember it. A steel ladle scraped along the bottom of a gravy pot, then the pour, then the moment the bread stops being bread. Steam coming off the plate. A paper napkin, a pickle spear, and a cup of coffee that the counter simply kept on filling. That plate was ordinary, and ordinary turned out to be the hard thing to keep. The objection is that turkey is a holiday food, and nobody wants it in March. Counters served turkey the whole year round for decades. Turkey only became a November food after the counters stopped putting it out in March. What ended it was the carving. A whole bird has to be roasted, rested, carved, and portioned by a person, and steam table turkey loaf was a poor substitute that customers noticed at once. 15 dishes, and one cause underneath very nearly all of them. Every single one required a person in the kitchen doing something at the moment of service, stirring a sauce, carving a roast, frying to order, ladling, when kitchens were rebuilt around holding, portioning, photographing, and delivering. Every dish that needed a pair of hands at the last minute lost its place. Something besides food went with them. A counterplate under gravy was one of the few places in mid-century American life where a person on low wages could sit down, be served by name, and be handed something that looked abundant. The pickle spear, the paper napkin, the bottomless cup, that was dignity sold in 20-cent increments, and the plate was how it arrived. It is worth saying plainly where that counter also stood. One more thing belongs on the same laminate. On the 1st of February 1960, 4 students from North Carolina A&T sat down at the Woolworth lunch counter in Greensboro and asked to be served. The counter that fed downtown America refused a great many people, and these same plates were on the menu behind them. A history of this food that leaves that out is not a finished history. So this is where it leaves us. Almost none of these 15 can be ordered anywhere near you. Most of them can still be described in detail by somebody in your own family who ate them. The recipes are in church cookbooks, in community binders, and in the memory of people in their 80s who have never once been asked. That is a much smaller window than it sounds like. Taste had very little to do with any of it. Labor, holding equipment, supply trucks, and photographs did the work. The women who made these dishes at home and the cooks who made them behind the counter were working the same problem out of the same tins. And they were good at it. That is worth remembering plainly without turning it into a golden age or a cautionary tale. If there is somebody in your family who ate at a counter like this one, ask them what they used to order and write the answer down before it goes. And I would still like to hear in the comments about the dish in your family that took 2 whole days and cost almost nothing to buy. Thank you for sitting with me through all 15 of them.